I am Scot Giles, the affiliated community minister to this congregation. My pronouns are he, his. I am dressed entirely in black this morning, except for a ministerial stole, and my hairstyle would cause a billiard ball to feel good about it. My call to worship. Come into this community of your heart, where you have been held in love and comfort, where you have shared your joy and your spirit, where you have asked questions that you felt needed asking, where you have found friendship and companions, where you have sometimes not agreed, and sometimes not felt comforted, and sometimes not felt heard. For here in this place, we can be together. We can gather in all the conflicting emotions tumbling around in our heads and hearts. We bring them together here and lay them at the altar of community. For community means that fragile, not perfect human beings can come together in the name of peace and seek to find peace again. And for our chalice lighting this morning, as we gather in this sacred moment, the spirit of life settles among her people. Here and now in the holy presence, we kindle our sacred flame, calling to memory the pain and heartache we all know too well. Here and now in the holy presence, we kindle our sacred flame, calling to remembrance our beloved community, all the beloved ancestors who join us from the heavens. And now I invite you to rise as you are able and join in singing hymn number 1000, Morning Has Come. And recite the words of our covenant. We unite to strengthen the bonds of kinship among all persons, to promote human dignity, and to increase reverence for God's creating, sustaining, and transforming power through worship, study, and service. Rousing. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Doree Bryant. My pronouns are she and hers, and I get to read such a fun message for all ages today. So if the young people here today could come keep me company up here, please do. Sit where you can see the screen because there's some really fun pictures. I see some people joining us here. Okay. The name of our message for all ages story today is The Good Egg. You do? It's fun, isn't it? I wasn't kidding, was I? I love this book. The Good Egg by Jory John and Pete Oswald. Oh, hello. I was just rescuing this cat. Know why? Because I'm a good egg. A very good egg. It's true. I do all kinds of good things, like I'll carry your groceries, I'll water your plants, I'll change your tires, I'll paint your house. If you need any help whatsoever, I'm your egg. I've always been a good egg. It's been this way from the start, even on my earliest days back at the store. There were a dozen of us living together under one recycled roof. There was Meg and Peg and Greg and Clegg and Shell and Shelley and Sheldon and Shelby and Egbert and Frank and other Frank. The other 11 eggs weren't on their best behavior. They weren't exactly good. They ignored their bedtime. They only ate sugary cereal. They threw tantrums. They cried for no reason. They broke their stuff on purpose. Meanwhile, I tried to take charge. I tried to fix their bad behavior. I tried to keep the peace because I was a good egg. A very good egg. Nobody seemed to care, though. Every night, I was exhausted. My head felt scrambled. Then, one fateful morning, I noticed some cracks in my shell. They were everywhere. My doctor said it was from all the pressure I was putting on myself. The pressure of making sure everybody was as good as me. I was cracking up. Literally. Something had to change. I'd had enough. I told Meg and Peg and Greg and Clegg and Shell and Shelley and Sheldon and Shelby and Egbert and Frank and other Frank that I was leaving. I can't be the only good egg in a bad carton, I said. Blah, 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 they replied. I left that night. I wandered from town to town. The hours became days. The days became weeks. I lost track of time. I was alone. Out there on the road under the stars, I really tried to focus on myself and what I needed. I took walks. I read books. I floated in the river. I wrote in my journal. I found simple moments to be quiet. I breathed in. I breathed out. I even started painting. For once, I found time for me. And guess what? Little by little, the cracks in my shell started to heal. My head no longer felt scrambled. I started to feel like myself again. So I made a big decision. I'm returning to my old carton and my friends. Besides, I'm kind of lonely out here. This time, I know what I need to do. I'll try not to worry so much. I'll be good to my fellow eggs, while also being good to myself. Here we go. Everybody missed me. I missed them too. Hello, Meg. Howdy, Peg. Hey, Greg. Greetings, Clegg. What's up, Shell? Aloha, Shelley. Heyo, Sheldon. Hi, Shelby. Good day, Egbert. What's happening, Frank? How do you do, other Frank? Sure, every once in a while, somebody's still a little bit bad, but it's not like before. Here's what I realized. The other eggs aren't perfect, and I don't have to be either. I'm okay with that. Yep, the old carton is back together. We're a solid dozen again. It's good to be home.
Okay, and now our young people, I think you can go find somewhere more comfortable to be, which probably would not be hard. And now I invite you all to join your hearts and minds together in the spirit of meditation or prayer. Spirit of life, we seek to clear from our hearts any feelings of guilt. May we see our past actions as ways to grow and learn, not as things to regret. We seek insight so that we may transform our brokenness into blessings and move forward in our lives with gratitude and purpose. May all of our unhealed hurts and emotional pain recede. May we stand restored. Let all painful memories fade, along with memories of regret, guilt, bitterness, and disappointment. May we be strong enough to let go of the sources of emotional pain in our lives, and may any injury done by others be healed. We see healing not only of body, but of our feelings of sadness, hopelessness, melancholia, fears of abandonment, or the edge of any threat made against us by another. May we look at our lives through the eyes of our mind. We know that our vision is limited and incomplete. Therefore, may we see through our heart as well and move away from any and all interior pain. We seek these things because we know that when anyone is able to feel confident and at peace, our world becomes a better place. May we make the world a better place in this way. Amen. morning is based on the Old Testament story of Abraham being called upon to sacrifice his son Isaac. However, I figured all of you probably know about that story, so I thought you might enjoy hearing a somewhat humorous and satirical version. Now, it is no longer considered politically correct in Unitarian Universalist circles to quote Woody Allen, so naturally that's what I'm going to do. This is from his story, The Scrolls, from his book Without Feathers. Scholars will recall that several years ago, a shepherd wandering in the Gulf of Aqaba stumbled upon a cave containing several large clay jars and also 2 tickets to the ice show. Inside the jars were discovered 6 parchment scrolls with ancient, incomprehensible writing, which the shepherd, in his ignorance, sold to the museum for $750,000 each. And here is what one of them said. And Abraham awoke in the middle of the night and said to his only son Isaac, I have had a dream where the voice of the Lord saith that I must sacrifice my only son. So put your pants on. And Isaac trembled and said, So what did you say? I mean, when he brought this whole thing up. What am I going to say? Said Abraham. I'm standing there at 2 a.m. in my underwear with the creator of the universe. Should I argue? Well, did he say why he wants me sacrificed? Isaac asked his father. But Abraham said, the faithful do not question. Now let's go, because I have a big day tomorrow. And Sarah, who heard Abraham's plans, grew vexed and said, How doth know it was the Lord? And not say thy friend who loveth practical jokes. For the Lord hateth practical jokes, and whosoever shall pull one shall be delivered into the hands of his enemy, whether he can pay the delivery charge or not. And Abraham answered, Because I know it was the Lord. It was a deep, resonant voice, well modulated, and nobody in the desert can get a rumble in it like that. And Sarah said, And art thou willing to carry out this senseless act? But Abraham told her, Frankly, yes, for to question the Lord's word is one of the worst things a person can do, especially with the economy in the state that it's in. And so he took Isaac to a certain place and prepared to sacrifice him. But at the last minute, the Lord stayed Abraham's hand and said, How could thou do such a thing? And Abraham said, But thou said, Never mind what I said, the Lord spake. Dost thou listen to every crazy idea that comes thy way? And Abraham grew ashamed, or not really, no. I jokingly suggest thou sacrifice Isaac, and thou immediately runs out to do it. And Abraham fell to his knees. See, I never know when you're kidding. And the Lord thundered, No sense of humor. I can't believe it. But doth this not prove I love thee, that I was willing to donate my only son on thy whim? And the Lord said, It proves that some men will follow any order, no matter how asinine, so long as it comes from a resonant, well-modulated voice. And with that, the Lord bid Abraham get some rest and check with him in the morning. Here ends my reading. Well, travel agents for guilt trips. To the young people who are with us this morning, I offer a bit of an apology that this sermon is on an adult topic. However, let me suggest that there might be something in it even for you if you stay with my words. If you've ever been bullied or blamed, perhaps you will gather some help from my remarks this morning. Now, I have a very strong suspicion that I'm probably the only person in this room today who regularly watches Christian television. But being a true universalist at heart and sincerely believing that all spiritual paths are valid and tend to converge over time, I do tune in from time to time. Among my favorite shows is the Dave Ramsey Show. Ramsey is an evangelical consultant who focuses on helping people manage money. And no, his solution isn't to tell everyone just to give their money to the church. One member of the pledge team did perhaps question my choice of this topic as we were in the midst of the stewardship drive. Well, maybe we want them to feel a little guilty? Ramsey is quite sure that people should support the church of their choice, and I certainly agree. But he actually has dug deeper into what the Old and New Testaments teach about money and spending, and it may not be what you think. Ramsey is best known for his flat recommendation that everyone avoid debt. He knows that some debt is unavoidable, a mortgage, education loans, a car payment, but he aims to help people avoid consumer debt, believing it's far too easy to get in over one's head and end up in serious trouble, and he believes that God does not want that for anyone. If you're curious about Ramsey and his 6-step program for living debt-free, you'll find a lot of podcasts that he made on YouTube, and I suggest you check them out. I think he goes a bit far, but I believe what he says is basically sound. But I like the additional sort of advice he gives as well. Advice about families, unsuccessfully launched children, abusive workplaces, and finding a place of peace and comfort in your life. He believes that a lot of people try to control others by the use of guilt, and he calls such people travel agents for guilt trips, and I stole the title of this sermon from him. If you want to learn about his advice dealing with relatives and friends who think you should, finance their lifestyles or do everything while they do little, check him out. A guilt trip is when someone seeks to encourage you to feel guilty so that you will do what they want. It is a form of manipulation. So here are some common strategies that someone might use to put you on board a guilt trip. These are popular favorites from a book titled Boundaries by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. Some of you may have heard these before in other arenas of your life. How could you do this to me after all I've done for you? It seems that you could think of someone other than yourself for once. If you really loved me, you would do what I want. It seems like you should care enough about the family to do this one thing. Well, you know how it's turned out in the past when you haven't done what I said. You know, if I had it, I would give it to you. That one resonates, huh? You have no idea how much we sacrificed for you. Let me tell you. Maybe after I'm dead and gone, then you'll be sorry. People may be passive aggressive. Well, I'm glad you finally did the housework. They may attempt to enforce a contract you never signed. You should do this for me because I work so hard. Or there may be attempts at blackmail. You need to take me on an expensive vacation because I heard the way you talked with my mother. Or there could be an attempt to claim an authority that is not real. I'm the eldest in the family, so you have to listen to me. Now, probably everyone in this room has had people who have tried to control them with one or more of these strategies. Such things always hurt, because in order for someone to do them, they have to believe they know you well enough to hook you. So every attempt to put you on a guilt trip is, in fact, a relationship betrayal. And ultimately, trying to put someone else on a guilt trip is a fool's game. Even if it works temporarily, it will cast a shadow. The other people will feel manipulated, and that will corrupt the relationship going forward. Now, while I now regard this story with humor, here's a personal tale. Many years ago, and this is a true tale, at Christmas, a relative presented me with a Christmas stocking full of small gifts. I thought it was kind of cute until the stocking was unpacked in front of a room full of other people. Other than a small selection of hard candies, the stocking was full of lumps of actual coal wrapped in cellophane. The relative then pulled out a physical list of times I had disappointed her by not doing what she wanted. She had one item on her list, her lump of coal, and she expected that I would sit there while she publicly recited a list of my perceived faults. Well, hey, I've been open about the fact I come from a family that's something of a train wreck, and I ain't kidding. I stopped that relative, so the strategy failed. But afterwards, I realized that I had been the target of a travel agent for guilt trips on steroids. It was one of my most valuable life lessons. I resolved I would never let such a thing happen again. If someone in my world turns out to be that sort of travel agent, I have no place for them. Study after study shows that when you become the target of a guilt trip, it will worsen any anxiety you may feel. Ditto, if you have a tendency to depression, obsessional compulsive feelings, shame, envy, it's really toxic stuff. When I distribute copies of this sermon through my website, I'll actually footnote the studies. They're well done and scary. Notice how all of these guilt-tripping strategies are presented as something supposedly said for your good and betterment, but are actually an effort to manipulate. Now, if it's an occasional thing, probably just a careless slip by someone who meant well, but if it happens all the time, well, then there's a toxin in your relationship, and the sooner you deal with it, the happier you're going to be. My personal take on people who make a habit to guilt trip others is a bit different from Dave Ramsey, the financial management guru. I've come to this understanding by trying to grasp the phenomenon. Ramsey and others like him take the view that when someone tries to manipulate you, it's all about control, trying to achieve their dominance and your submission. And I'm sure that's part of it. But deeper than that understanding, I came to realize that when someone wants to be a travel agent for guilt trips, they disclose that they are the person who has a problem, not you. Or as I've come to say in my consultation room, someone trying to guilt trip you shows that they have a problem. But if it works, that shows you have a problem. You need to work on your boundaries, so the only person who gets to control your behavior is you. Now, as laying a guilt trip on someone is such an utterly toxic thing to do, even if it succeeds, it stirs up trouble downstream. Why do people do it? I think an attempt to lay a guilt trip on someone is actually anger in disguise. It's why, if the guilt trip does not work to control you, very often the situation devolves into threats and the relationship cut off if the guilt is unsuccessful. What is really underneath the attempt to lay a guilt trip is a deep, unconscious rage being indirectly expressed. Now, in your spiritual explorations, I'm sure some of you have heard of the theological concept of the scapegoat. For those of you who have not, you may be surprised to learn that it is one of the most ancient concepts in the Old Testament. Also quite relevant to my topic today, which is why I put a photo of my horny friend on the screen when I began this talk. The scapegoat first appears in the book of Leviticus, chapter 16, verse 10. It was the name given to a goat who was allowed to escape into the wilderness of ancient Judea, there to perish by starvation or predation. Before being allowed this fictional escape on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the high priest would lay his hands on the head of the goat and transfer to it all of the sins and iniquities of the people of Israel. It was believed that as the goat perished, so perished the sins of the people for the past year. The idea was that the sins of a person or group of people could be spiritually transferred to another who, by being punished, discharged those sins. Much later, with the rise of Christianity, the theme would become basic to the theology of the Christos, of Christ, who by being crucified lifted the sins of all, or so it was believed. Jesus is the idea of the scapegoat writ large. Now, today we often do not want to think about how primitive and bloodthirsty much of ancient religion was. Long before the Hebrew religion was a gleam in Moses' eye, peoples even more ancient believed that it was important to sacrifice to appease the gods. As the world appeared scary and hostile to them, they assumed the gods were hostile and scary too, and had to be appeased. The typical sacrifice in the ancient world was of what was called the first fruits. And our modern holiday of Thanksgiving is actually a distant echo of this. The sacrifice of the first fruits meant one would offer as a sacrifice the first round of produce from a harvest. You would offer as a sacrifice the first animal successfully hunted for the season. And for millennia, people would sacrifice their firstborn children, sometimes horribly. And we know that the ancient people who would eventually become the Hebrews did this too. In deference to the young people present this morning, I will not go into detail, but suffice it to say, the archaeological evidence is persuasive. Now, the Old Testament was actually written at the end of a 1,000-year-long literary dark age in the ancient world. We have no idea what cultural changes happened during that 1,000-year period. But by the time the scribes began the task of writing what would become the Old Testament, the practice of human sacrifice had come to be regarded as horrible. But it was still enshrined in tradition, and traces of it can still be found elsewhere in the Old Testament on a careful reading. It's widely believed by modern Bible scholars that the story of Abraham intending to sacrifice his firstborn son Isaac but being stopped by God was inserted into the text as a way to justify ending the practice of human sacrifice. And I think we can all agree that was an advance in human civilization. So the tradition of the scapegoat is an ancient one, pivotal to the progress of a barbaric religion into a civilized one, as well as the basis of much Christian theology, regardless of whether one considers oneself a Christian or not. It can't be denied that Christianity has had a massive impact on our culture. Now, in a more enlightened and evolved time, a lot of us would like to believe that ideas such as the scapegoat have outlasted their utility, and we'd all be better off if they would fade away. But I think the theme of the scapegoat, holding others responsible for one's own feelings, is very much with us still. We see it in all those people who try to manipulate others by making them feel guilty if they don't do what is wanted. You see, the travel agent for guilt trips is someone who is trying to hold another accountable for how they feel. They feel you should do what they want. You're not doing that, so they feel anger. Now, anger is a secondary emotion. When we have a primary emotion like fear, loss, sadness, and so on, those emotions cause us to feel endangered and vulnerable. And one way to cope with the feeling of being endangered is to shift into anger, because then the brain will produce a surge of energy which helps us feel better, and we instinctively try to establish control to lower the sense of risk. Well, manipulating others is one of the easiest ways to get a sense of control, and trying to make them feel guilty is a very easy way to do that. The travel agent for guilt trips is always someone compensating for inner feelings of vulnerability. By getting you to do what they want, they make you the scapegoat for their own fear and weakness. If you do what they want, they feel better. And the scapegoat has carried away into the darkness the pain, just as in days of yore. The travel agent for guilt trips is someone feeling anxiety, and they have selected you to be their anti-anxiety drug. The archetype of the scapegoat is with us still. It's just gone under the surface of things. People still want to hold someone other than themselves accountable for what they desire. And when the guilt trip comes out, that is the agenda. So don't let yourself be a scapegoat. It never ends well. One of the very few things that advice columnist Ann Landers had to say that I agree with is, no one can take advantage of you without your consent. Now, like a lot of things she published, that is an overstatement. Anyone can be victimized or deceived, and you don't give permission for that. Still, there is a level where, frequently, when someone is trying to take advantage of you, make you a scapegoat, if you will, they need you to play along. If you will not get hooked, the guilt trip can't start, like my giving back a relative the Christmas stocking and saying, I don't want to hear this. Therefore, the wisdom from the ancient religious theme of the scapegoat is not to get hooked. That is the spiritual skill to acquire if you want to deal with a travel agent or a guilt trip. Now, in this matter, I can only speak for myself about what has helped me deal with those in my life who sought to control me by making me feel guilty. Well, first, I do try to have empathy. I'm not a soft person, but I try to be a compassionate one. Therefore, when someone tries to pull a manipulative stunt, I remind myself that what they're doing says a lot about them and not much about me. They're in pain, scared, or weak. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to roll over, but it does mean that I will not be cruel if there's any other option. I might speak with a softer voice. I might find a polite way to decline the attempt or just ignore it. If I know what my guilt tripper is scared of, I may try to speak to that. Sometimes it works, not all the time. The other thing I do is to remind myself that I don't need anyone's permission to live my own life. If someone doesn't like a decision I've made, that's their right. But I don't have to go along with them, nor do I need to explain myself. Put that one carefully in your mind, because I see this a lot. You say no to an inappropriate request, but you still feel you need to say more. So you try to explain yourself, give excuses, try to convince the other person that it's okay for you to decline what they're trying to get you to do. This is a mistake, in my opinion. You don't need anyone's permission to live your own life. You do not have to explain yourself or give reasons. No means no. You may, in the interest of avoiding misunderstandings, choose to explain your thinking to another so they have that information against future requests, but you're not obligated to even do that. For example, I sometimes get requests to loan money. I've learned such loans are a very, very bad investment because they are never repaid. So I simply say no. That's a personal policy not to loan money, and then I shut up. I do not engage in further conversation about that, even if it means I need to get up and leave. I don't need anyone's permission to live my own life. I don't have to explain my no. And that is the vaccine against the guilt trip. You do not want to be a scapegoat for someone else's anxiety. Just as the ancient Hebrews created the story of God staying the hand of Abraham so he did not scapegoat his son Isaac, it is the testimony of the ages that scapegoating is wrong. Nothing good ever comes from it. As was said by a computer in the movie War Games, the only way to win that game is not to play. And that is my sermon for this morning. And now we join in our offering, and Jerome.
Each week we take up an offering over and above member pledges, and if you don't want coal in your stocking, I can't believe I've got to ask for money after that. Your contribution here goes to wonderful things. It goes to support this congregation that has wonderful pastoral care, that has staff that is a glue that binds us together and inspires us and our children, and it helps maintain our church as a strong beacon of values in the northwest suburbs. And today we are going to also share our gifts with the Kenneth Young Center in a Share Your Plate offering. And the Kenneth Young Center provides free LGBTQ plus social, supportive, and educational programming to youth, young adults, and families centering on social justice, diversity, racial equity, and inclusion. The center provides meeting and social gathering space for queer community members of all ages. At the LGBTQ Center at Kenneth Young, youth can find advocacy opportunities, professional training, and community events throughout the year. Young adults can find opportunities for social gatherings, networking, job and career support, and can get involved with the North Suburban Pride Network. And today, help us help them with your generosity, and thank you for doing so. Thanks a lot.
please rise as you are able and join in singing hymn number 128, The Fire of Commitment. Responsibly with me the words of our benediction. And now may the truth that makes us free,
and now may the truth that makes us free,
and the hope that never dies,
and the hope that never dies,
and the love that casts out fear,
and the love that casts out fear,
lead us forward together,
lead us forward together,
until the day spring breaks,
until the day spring breaks,
and the shadows flee away.
and the shadows